You know how it is in real estate. When a listing stalls, there are two solutions that always seem to come up. But what if those go-to answers are actually hurting your sale? Well, in this explainer, we're going to uncover why the real key to selling a home isn't just about price or promotion, it's about a much, much smarter strategy, positioning.
Okay, so let's set the scene. You've got a great listing, but it's just sitting there. Your seller is starting to get a little anxious. What's the very first piece of advice you always hear from your broker, your mentor, your colleagues?
Yep, you already know it's the price. This is the industry's go-to one-size-fits-all answer. And hey, sometimes it might be true, but it's become less of a thoughtful diagnosis and way more of an automatic reflex. And that's the real problem here. When we rely on these reflexes, we stop thinking like strategic business owners. We just end up regurgitating advice instead of digging in and diagnosing the actual problem. You see, price might be a symptom, but it is rarely the disease itself. This brings us right to the second lazy answer in real estate, what I like to call the great exposure myth. You've heard it a million times, the idea that if you just get more eyeballs on the property, it will magically sell. But as we're about to see, that's a huge misunderstanding of how buyers actually think. So the promise we're sold is simple, right? More exposure, more clicks, more views, that'll lead to a sale. But the reality is that exposure is just an amplifier. It's like a megaphone. If you have a great, clear story, exposure will shout it from the rooftops. But if your story is confusing or unappealing, well, exposure just makes that rejection louder and faster. So maybe we need to redefine this term. Exposure isn't the solution. It's a diagnostic tool. A much better way to think about it is as a stress test. The market is giving you direct, real-time feedback on whether your home's story, its positioning, is actually working. And what does that feedback look like? Oh, you've seen this 100 times. The listing gets tons of impressions online, and the seller feels good about those big numbers, but the phone isn't ringing for showings. And the feedback from the few people who do see it is always kind of vague, non-committal, and most importantly, zero offers. So here's the crucial point to understand. This scenario isn't a marketing failure. It's market feedback telling you loud and clear that your value story isn't landing. Buyers are seeing it, they're comparing it to other options out there, and they're deciding it's not the one. This isn't a more exposure problem. It's a clearer value story problem. Okay, so if price and exposure are the lazy answers, what's the smart one? It's a concept called positioning, and this is where we really get into the psychology of how buyers actually make decisions. So, what is positioning? Well, to put it simply, positioning is all about how a home fits into a buyer's mental framework. See, buyers don't look at homes in a vacuum. They are constantly comparing, categorizing, and sorting. When your home is positioned correctly, they get it almost instantly. And when they get it, they act. Think about what's going on in a buyer's head. They're constantly running these calculations. They're weighing the price against the other houses they could buy. They're looking at the condition and asking if it meets their expectations for that price. They're thinking about the location and how it fits their lifestyle. And, this one is so important, they're balancing the trade-offs. Your job is to make the answers to all these questions obvious. And that, right there, is your direct path to an offer. Clear positioning makes the decision easy for the buyer. It just removes all that friction and doubt that can kill a deal. And that clarity is what finally pushes them to take action. Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually do it? Well, the key thing to remember is that positioning isn't something you fix after a listing goes stale. No, it's a strategic process that has to start long before you ever hit publish on the MLS. Here are the 4 steps to make it happen. First, you choose a competitive price band, not just one single price. This places it in a specific competitive set. Second, you frame the home against its direct competition within that band. Third, you figure out and highlight the features that make it the clear winner in that comparison. And fourth, and this is absolutely crucial for building trust, you acknowledge the trade-offs honestly. This quote right here is a golden rule. Look, every single home has compromises. The great location, but the small yard, the beautiful renovation, but it's on a busy street. When you pretend those trade-offs don't exist, buyers don't just ignore it. Their minds fill in the blanks, and trust me, they always assume the worst. Being upfront isn't a weakness. It's your most powerful tool for building trust. And here's the real payoff for you as an agent. When you've framed the whole sale around positioning right from the start, a conversation about a price change feels completely different. It stops being this emotional defeat for the seller. Instead, it becomes a logical, strategic adjustment based on real market feedback. all in the service of finding a better position. So let's bring it all together now. This isn't just about learning a new tactic. It's about adopting a completely different mindset. It's about moving from being a reactive agent to a proactive business owner who truly understands the market. I mean, just look at the difference here. The old way is all about defending a price, getting caught up in seller emotion, and just reacting with those tired old cliches. The smart way? It's about learning from the market, tracking the singles from day one, using that data as pure feedback, and being ready to pivot strategically and quickly. If you remember absolutely nothing else from this explainer, I want you to remember these next two things. First, as we see here, exposure isn't the solution, it's the test. It stress tests your entire value proposition. And second, positioning is what actually sells the home. That clarity, that story, that's what gives a buyer the confidence to make one of the biggest financial decisions of their life. Ultimately, understanding this distinction is what elevates you as a professional. It's what keeps your listings from going stale, it keeps your client conversations grounded in logic instead of emotion, and it makes your advice truly incredibly valuable. So I'll leave you with this one question to think about in your own business. The next time a listing gets quiet, are you going to default to the easy slogan, or are you going to step back and diagnose the problem like a strategic business owner? The choice is yours.